Welcome to St. Stephen's Episcopal Church here in Armonk, New York. My name is Father Nils Chittenden. I'm the rector of this beautiful church, which was constructed in 1842 on a couple of acres of land given by farmer Elisha Sutton. Around 1850, the church acquired the rest of Mr. Sutton's small farm and subdivided the 14 acres into half-acre lots. In so doing, St. Stephen's created a residential and commercial subdivision which, in due course, became known as Armonk. The main part of the sanctuary was built in the Greek Revival style. This neoclassical style was popular largely because it sent out unambiguous signals that this new federal republic, the United States of America, should be strongly identified with the birthplace of democracy in ancient Greece. St. Stephen's remains a fine example of American vernacular Greek Revival architecture. When the sanctuary was first built, it had windows of plain glass. This was consistent with the theology of the time, favouring simplicity and letting light flood into a square-shaped room in which readings and sermons were the main focus. However, as the 1850s gave way to the 1860s, a new ecclesiastical movement from England came to the United States, the Gothic Revival. With it came a new fondness for stained glass and higher church practices. So it was that between around 1860 and through to 1890, St. Stephen's replaced all of its clear glass windows with stained glass. Armonk in the 1860s was not a grand place with prominent, wealthy inhabitants. Where other towns, and of course New York City, were commissioning stained glass from the likes of Tiffany, St. Stephen's windows were much humbler. Of the 3 pairs of long rectangular windows in the original part of the church, 2 pairs are from architectural pattern books of the day. But that shouldn't in any way diminish them. They are well made, with vibrant glass, and they greatly enhance the sanctuary. In fact, in a region brimming with fancy Victorian designer windows, these are the exclusive ones. The pair at the back of the church are of this type, but little else is known. They may perhaps have been the first stained glass to have been added. The pair next to them are more colourful, even though from a pattern book, and an unknown maker. But we do know a little about the donor and the people memorialised in these windows. One of the original investors that enabled the New York Times to be founded, one Edward B. Wesley, a parishioner at Christ Church in Rye, was a friend of the rector of Grace Church, White Plains, the Reverend Dr. William Harris, who founded St. Stephen's Armonk. Mr. Wesley's son, John, was a soldier and died in 1861. Perhaps Dr. Harris, mindful of St. Stephen's looking to add stained glass, suggested to his friend that he might donate a pair of windows. Whatever exactly happened, Edward Wesley did donate that pair and dedicated one to the memory of his parents and one to the memory of his recently departed son. A panel from this latter window is now used every week on the cover of our worship booklet. Of the 3 known donors of windows in St. Stephen's, the pair of windows next to the Wesleys was a gift from a Mr. W.R. Carr. We don't at this stage know where he lived, but we presume Northcastle. We do know that he was a Freemason and a member of the 402 Lodge of New York. Even if that information were not available, it would have been clear from the content of one of the 2 windows he gave that he was indeed a Freemason, since that window, the one on the Maple Avenue side, is full of Masonic imagery. From the poem to the square and compass and the words in hoc signo vinces, which is the Latin for in this sign conquer, a significant Masonic motto, we are left in no doubt about Mr. Carr's affiliations. What we also know about Mr. Carr is that he endured, as did many of his contemporaries, much sadness in his life. He lost children as infants, and his daughter Lulu Amanda died aged 18. These young people are interred in St. Stephen's Cemetery, suggesting that the Carrs were indeed a local North Castle family. Infant and youth mortality was all too commonplace in every generation before the mid-20th century. Even so, the impact on family members was devastating. Of all the windows in St. Stephen's, the second of the Carr windows is the most poignant. Memorialising his lost children, he commissions a finely worked stained glass window with very emotive imagery. On the top panel, lovingly watching over his departed loved ones, is the Holy Spirit in the familiar form of a dove. Beneath that is a flowering cross, indicating the flourishing of resurrected life following death. Underneath this is a stanza from a poem which originated in England and by the mid to late 1860s was very popular in the United States. First published in 1858 with the title The Loved and Lost, it was reprinted in America in the Anti-Slavery Standard on October the 10th, 1863. Coincidentally, that day was the 21st anniversary of the founding of St. Stephen's. This poem gained much currency over the rest of the 1860s as family after family became bereaved through the losses of the Civil War. The stanza on the Carr window reads, "They are not lost, they are within the door that shuts out loss and every hurtful thing. In their Redeemer's presence evermore find God himself their Lord and Judge and King." We can only imagine the grief that Mr. Carr experienced, and to this day this window bears testament to this and to the memory of his children. As we move onwards, we find ourselves in front of this church's only rose window, so called for its shape. There is a legend surrounding this window which, so far as we know, cannot be verified. In around the years 1915 through 16, the village of Kensico was slated for disbandment to make way for the Kensico Reservoir. There was at least one house of worship in that village, a Methodist church, and it is recorded that its stained glass went to furnish what became the Methodist church in North White Plains. That church is now an Egyptian Coptic church. But it is alleged that this rose window here in St. Stephen's also came from Kensico. Who knows? Much more research is needed. What we do know is that it is a beautiful window and was badly in need of restoration. It had this dream fulfilled in 2018 and it's now ready for the next 100 and something years. The third of the window donors that we know about is a well-known large family from the Armonk and Greenwich, Connecticut area. The Ferris family is very much in evidence in St. Stephen's Cemetery, but one particularly interesting fact is that a member of this branch of the Ferris family decided to relocate to the Midwest. What we think is the son of that person, a George Washington Ferris Jr., studied engineering and went on to design an attraction for the 1893 World Exposition in Chicago. We now know this attraction design as the Ferris wheel. The Ferris window is behind the high altar of St. Stephen's and was the crown jewel of the new extension to St. Stephen's Church started in 1889. This addition was very much in the new Gothic Revival style, and the window is modelled on a standard Gothic window design called a triple lancet. In the centre panel, we see a depiction of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, holding a lamb. Above this hovers, as in one of the Carr windows, the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove. In the side panels of the Ferris window, we see various significant Christian allegorical images,
such as the pelican, the symbol of piety. The legend is that the pelican, in need of something with which to feed her young, but finding nothing, pecked her own breast in order to draw blood to provide nourishment. It is an allegory of self-sacrificial behaviour.
In the window we also see images of the Christian Eucharist in the bread and the grapevine, and the symbol of the crown for the kingship of Christ. During this presentation, you may have noticed that the pews here have cutouts of what appear to be famous historical figures, and you may be wondering why. For the record, this video has been produced in the middle of the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, a global event without parallel in the past 100 years. For 4 months, we have not been able to meet for worship in person. But in the last 2 weeks, we tentatively have begun to reopen, but with strictly limited numbers, at a minimum of 6 feet of separation. These historical figure cutouts, all with inspiring stories of faith, indicate where it is permitted to sit. So, in conclusion, this brings us back to the John Wesley Memorial window, which has a rounded panel with the crown of Christ the King. Ordinarily, this might not be particularly noteworthy, but given that we are in the coronavirus pandemic, it's worth noting that corona is the Latin for crown, a fitting image with which to bid you farewell from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church and its historic windows.